You know that fancy lobster dinner that costs a small fortune? Well, what if I told you that it used to be considered literally prison food? Today, we're going to crack open the absolutely wild story of how the lobster went from the bottom of the ocean floor to the very top of the luxury food chain.
I mean, just look at this. On one side, it's food for prisoners, a punishment. And now, it's a high-end luxury dish. This has got to be one of the craziest glow-ups in food history. So how on earth did that happen? Let's get into it.
All right, so first, let's talk about today's luxury dish. We need to set the scene for the world we're all familiar with right now.
Yeah, I mean, ask anyone. If you're thinking of a fancy, celebratory meal, something really special, lobster is almost always going to come up. It's basically shorthand for wealth, for fine dining. But, and this is a huge but, it was not always like this. Not even close.
Okay, so let's jump back in time. Way back. Because in the past, the lobster had a pretty terrible reputation, to be honest. People actually called it the cockroach of the ocean. Seriously.
And get this, it wasn't just that it wasn't a luxury food. Serving lobster to someone important or wealthy was considered a straight-up insult. Imagine that. It was seen as food for the poorest of the poor, the absolute bottom of society.
So, why the bad rap? Well, it was simple, really. They were everywhere. I mean, literally everywhere. Back in the 17th century, they were so abundant that after a big storm, they just wash up on shore in these massive piles, sometimes 2 feet high. People didn't see them as food, they saw them as a nuisance, a pest you had to clean up.
So, if the wealthy wouldn't touch them, who was eating all these lobsters? Well, the list is pretty telling. They were fed to prisoners, they were fed to servants, they were ground up and used for fishing bait, they were even fed to dogs and cats. That's where lobster was on the food chain.
But here's the kicker. This is my favorite part of the whole story. The prisoners and servants got so sick of eating lobster that they actually protested. They demanded that they couldn't be forced to eat it more than a few times a week because they considered it cruel and unusual punishment. They literally saw it as part of their jail sentence. Just, wow.
Okay, so how in the world does a food go from being a punishment to being a prize? What was the big turning point for the lobster?
Well, it didn't happen overnight, that's for sure. It happened in a few key stages. You start with that crazy abundance back in the 17th century. But then, fast forward to the 1900s, and a couple of things happen. New canning technology, and, because of that, a whole lot of overfishing. And those two things completely flip the script, creating the one thing that makes something valuable: scarcity.
So let's break that down. It all started with something pretty simple: the can. Around the 1940s, people figured out how to can lobster meat. Suddenly, you could ship it far away from the coast, and a whole new market opened up inland. That created this huge spike in demand, which of course led to huge commercial fishing operations. And for the very first time in history, the thing that was once piled up on beaches started to become rare.
And you can see the result in the price tag. It's just staggering. Back in the 1880s, you could get a pound of lobster for about 11 cents. 11 cents! Fast forward to 2014, and that same pound is over $32. That's an insane price explosion. And it's not because the lobster suddenly tasted better, it was simply because it went from being everywhere to being hard to find. Okay, so scarcity kickstarted the whole thing, but what keeps the price so high today? I mean, we've got modern fishing boats and technology, right? So let's look at the journey from prison to plate. Well, the truth is, lobsters are a complete logistical nightmare. First off, catching them is hard work, and it could be pretty dangerous. Then they get sick really easily, which makes trying to farm them in captivity almost impossible. And to top it all off, when you want to ship them somewhere, you have to keep them alive. That means special tanks, cold temperatures, the whole shebang. Every single one of those challenges adds cost, which gets passed on to you. So when you really think about it, the lobster itself didn't change at all. The animal is the same. What changed was us, our perception of its value. Its worth isn't really in the lobster itself. It's a value that we as a society created. It's built on the simple economic principle of scarcity and the story we now tell about it being a luxury. And that leaves us with a pretty wild thought, doesn't it? What's a common food that you and I take for granted right now that could one day become the next lobster, the next super expensive luxury dish? I don't know, maybe it's something simple like avocados or corn, who knows? It's definitely something to chew on.